But first, I just want to say thank you to Youngry for giving me the opportunity to be here with you all today. Really excited by this new series that you guys have launched, which is this Lunch and Learn. I think it's great because I think it gives everyone really out there, the masses, an opportunity to really appreciate entrepreneurism and learn about some new methods to raise capital. And I just got a message saying it's working, so here we go. So I'll start with a little bit about me, my background, and kind of the industry of crowd finance, where it's headed. What I really wanted to do was sort of talk a little bit about some of the reasons why I got into this, why I think it's so important to inspire entrepreneurism, and hopefully I could not only give you guys some good advice and maybe some guidance on raising capital in this new environment, but maybe also even some good inspiration. So a little bit about me. My name is Dara Albright. My background is very conventional Wall Street background. I'm now on Wall Street for about 25 years. I guess you could say I'm what is called a crowd finance advocate. In fact, I'm everything advocate for fintech and utilizing this modern technologies and as well as modern legislation to really create new opportunities for entrepreneurs and investors. So what we're seeing now is we're really at such an incredible moment in history. At this point now, people, it used to be where you had to be a big corporation to go out there and access capital. For a while, it was really challenging, especially in the recent years, for small businesses to really be able to raise capital through the crowd. And there was a whole process to it, and you typically had to be a much larger company to go public and actually be able to raise capital from the crowd. And because of new legislation and because of new technologies, that's all changing. And it's really, really exciting time, I think, a time in our history where we have all of these new modern technologies and we have modern legislation. We call the modern financial technologies, we call that fintech, and modern the modern legislation, people kind of refer to that as reg tech. And what's happening, because these two forces are coming together, that access to capital is becoming more and more democratized. So people are actually able to go out now and leverage technology to go out and raise capital for a company. So what I kind of thought that we would do, and I guess I'll try to answer questions as questions come in, but I figured we would first sort of talk a little bit about what crowd finance actually is, how we could actually use it to for you guys to raise capital, whether you're just starting out with an idea on a napkin, or even whether you're a little bit more of a more mature company that's looking for expansion capital. So first, I usually like to start off by talking about what crowd finance is not. And there was a cartoon a couple of years ago that was in the in New York Magazine, and it featured these two panhandlers on the street that asking for money, and the caption reads, "Remember, we're not begging, we're crowdfunding." People always laugh when they see that cartoon or they hear about it, but the truth is that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with crowd finance. What crowd finance really is, it's just like regular finance, except with one fundamental exception. Instead of capital coming from big institutions, or government entities, it's coming from we the people. So it's an opportunity for entrepreneurs to basically go out to their community and raise capital, or even go out to the whole world through the internet and raise capital. And that's really, what's an exciting time. So questions are starting to come in. I have one here that talks about what types of companies have you seen succeed with equity crowdfunding? And what we could talk about some of these success stories too, and I'd love to give you guys some great stories, which I think will also be inspiring. But so far, what we've seen, the companies that have really succeeded or have really done best with equity crowdfunding have been companies that are are consumer companies. And that is because for consumer companies, a lot of consumer-oriented companies, they're actually going out to their customer base. So companies that have a large customer base are just perfect for equity crowdfunding. So that's usually, those are typically the kind of companies that we see that are some of the most successful ones out there. You may have heard of a company called Elio Motors. They did the first, I guess you could call it the first successful equities crowd-financed IPO. And that they used what's called the Regulation A+ to raise capital. And what they did was they went out and they tested the waters first. And they went out to they did a lot of marketing. They went out to their network and they were able to go out there and as well as their customer base, and they were able to go out there and garner interest and see, what really the market would be for their stock. And they were very successful in their offering. They were able to raise about $17 million. The stock is now publicly traded over the counter. That's probably the first kind of real success story that we've seen on the Reg A+ side. But I love this whole concept, really, of testing the waters, because what I love most about crowdfunding, and I look at even the reward-based crowdfunding is so important, I think, for companies to go out there first. And and when we say reward-based, that's like a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo. Basically, what that is a pre-product sale. So to give you guys an example, let's say you have an idea for a company or product that you want to bring to market. The best thing I would suggest anyone do would be to go out there to on a Kickstarter or on an Indiegogo and start a campaign and see if there's actually, an interest for the product. It's a great way to kind of go out there and start building your brand, start getting your story out there, start testing the water, seeing if there's actually a market for the product. It really does not cost you anything. It's not a security, so you don't have to deal with any any kind of the securities regulations, because you're operating kind of outside that umbrella. And really what you're doing is you're pre-selling the product. And so that I would really recommend that most companies would, when they get started, what they should do. And so, let's say you have a company, let's say you've got this idea, you want to go out there and you've got this product and you want to see if it's a viable product. Well, you go on to Kickstarter, you launch a campaign, very inexpensive to do. Now, let's say, you really don't get many bites. Well, then there's an opportunity for you at that point to go back to the drawing board and start over again. But let's say you actually, have a very successful rewards-based crowdfunding campaign, and there are many companies that have had real successful ones that we could kind of talk about that I'm sure you guys have heard of. And so let's say you do that, and you have a very successful campaign. Well, at that point, what you've done was you started building up a customer base. And as you're building up your customer base, ultimately, when you turn this over to equity crowdfunding, you're going to then have the opportunity to convert those customers into investors. So I actually see some questions coming in, so I'm just going to start with some of the questions. So I see Vincent, thanks. It was really great talking to you at the Crowd Invest Summit. I thought it was a great experience. It was a great event. What made me so excited about the event was that it really was the first one out there that really garnered the actual crowd. I've been doing a lot of these events for the crowd finance industry for the last couple of years, and been involved in a lot of them. And a lot of them are, especially when we started, they were really more focused on the people that are really within the industry. And this was really kind of the first time that we really expanded beyond just the people that were kind of focused on shaping the industry. It was more than just the attorneys or the investment bankers or the capital raisers. I mean, we really had an opportunity there to really bring people from the outside, which was so great. And the exhibit hall was actually filled with so many companies that were out there, not only showcasing, their offering, if you will, because now you're one of the great things about a lot of this crowdfunding legislation is the ability to really get out there and attract the crowd. But they were actually there showing their product. So I love that. I thought it was a great event. I'm really excited to be participating in the next one. I think that they just announced it's going to be in September. So that'll be really exciting. I think also, just for entrepreneurs, I mean, we had so much fun just kind of, doing that interview there at the summit. It was really fun to talk to you guys and to talk about, just inspiring entrepreneurism. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the success stories that I just find really inspirational, because the truth is capital raising is just so hard. And it really became harder and harder over the years, especially when most people didn't really have an opportunity. If you don't have, friends and family with big checking accounts, it's really hard to be able to raise capital for a company. So for startups, crowdfunding offers just such a great opportunity to really get out there and really start building your crowd and your audience. I see a question coming in talking about Bitcoin, which focus really on in the fintech space. What I love about Bitcoin, or what I just love in general, what technology is, how technology is just really kind of transforming financial services. It's changing our whole monetary system around. I think our children are, they're not even going to really understand what it's even like to walk around with, or the feel of a dollar bill or coins. Everything is really just virtual now. And that's kind of how I see, it really going. I mean, all of, now, it's not, writing checks are becoming obsolete. My kids actually, they don't even understand the concept of money, because they go and they buy an app online. They don't even know that it actually costs something. So, I think that there's, so many interesting things are really happening in just the technology space that's really transforming financial services in general. So, okay, what do I feel about universal? I see a question. What do I feel about universal currency? That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it. I guess that will put a lot of the that will put a lot of the currency traders out of business. I think that it could be interesting if we had maybe that's something I kind of want to give some thought to. What would be some of the benefits or some of the maybe disadvantages of that. I think that it's, I think in some ways, I think it could be really helpful, because you would really have a unified system. that could be, that's something I would definitely want to think about. Oh, and I see Joseph on there. Yeah, let's definitely set that up. So, what else could I talk about? Should I just keep going and rambling? Because I could really ramble on forever. So, let's see. Should I share some inspirational stories for entrepreneurs? Some of my favorites, because I'm happy to do that. I think that there are some just really great crowdfunding stories out there that I found inspirational. When I first started doing these events, I used to have I used to do them in cities all over the country, and I used to go on to Kickstarter, see where there were some successful campaigns, and then I would contact some of the entrepreneurs in that area, and then I would invite them to come speak about their experience. And I've learned so much from that, and they're just such great stories. Like one of the first ones we had was actually the very first one was Pebble Watch. And I love that story. The CEO from Pebble came on the actual day that they just passed the 10 million mark on their Kickstarter campaign and closed it. And what I love most about that story was that, here are these guys that developed this smartwatch that syncs up with your phone and decided, we're going to go to the venture capitalists and we're going to go raise money. And they sat down with venture capitalists, and venture capitalists said, "Now, you know what? We don't really think that there'll be a market for this." And they said, "Well, you know what? We'll prove you wrong. We think otherwise." And that's exactly what they did. Went on to Kickstarter. And there was just, a huge appetite for their product, and that enabled them to then move on and get venture capital funding. But there are a lot of even smaller companies out there that are really cool crowdfunding success stories. There's a company called TiltPod that they developed, and they also spoke at one of the events. They developed this little device that you put your camera or your phone into, and you can maneuver the phone any which way you want so that you could actually capture the perfect shot at the perfect angle. And those guys, what I thought was interesting about their story was that they went on to Kickstarter and weren't really getting any bites for a while. And then one morning, all of a sudden, they woke up and they were 6 times oversubscribed. There were all these people that were funding the project. And they realized, what was it? What was the catalyst? And it happened to have been a blogger on the other side of the world that got wind of the project and then went and wrote an article about it. And that got picked up, from all over the planet, and then people started buying. And I love that story only because I think it's just so great for people to be able to go out there and really use the internet and social media really to expand their network and to always be building their network. The best thing you could actually do is be just out there and going out there and just even in your spare time, scouring articles on the internet, anything relating to your business, taking anyone who's mentioned in those articles or who's writing those articles, write those names down, put them in on a spreadsheet, and then go out and find them on LinkedIn, start following them on Twitter, and start really kind of accumulating a sizable network. Here's some other questions coming in. Valuation for equity crowdfunding raises. What is the best metrics to determine this? Is it similar to how you raise for seed or later stage or Series A? That is a great question, and something that is definitely asked a lot. I think as far as valuation for equity crowdfunding, and as far as valuation for any kind of company in general, companies are valued. There's based on their peers, the market. But then there's also something called supply and demand. And I think, what's interesting with crowdfunding, and I think why the equity crowdfunding and how that's a different path than if you were going to venture capitalists, angel investors, typically you're going to, your valuation is going to be, based on, peer companies. Typically, it's going to be based on kind of the standard of, what are seed rounds going for now? What are Series A rounds going for? This kind of, the typical what the market is. With crowdfunding, I think it's really interesting because crowdfunding adds that element of supply and demand. And I think you have a better chance of a higher valuation in many cases. Well, if you have a real viable product or business with crowdfunding, because it adds that element of supply and demand. So I love that about crowdfunding too. And I also like with crowdfunding is that even when you're raising capital, doing equity crowdfunding, you're also getting the opportunity to continue building your brand, building your network. You're strengthening your relationships with your customers. You're converting customers into investors, and I think that's what's really happening now, just in general, just with technology, is that we're all becoming, just through Facebook. I mean, and social media, we are all becoming we're all consumers. We're all brand, ambassadors. The consumers are becoming the brands are becoming the consumers, and we're all investors. We all have that we all have that opportunity to play all of these roles, and I think that's really interesting. In this kind of this whole new paradigm. I mean, even if you look at it, even how technology is even transforming, media, financial media. This is something I've been really thinking a lot about, and I'm coming out with another article just really kind of focused on this. But even what you're doing right here with what we're doing through Youngry on Youngry's Facebook page. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, could you imagine, 20, 30 years ago, I mean, we never would have had this opportunity to actually just, TV was just very one-dimensional. I mean, if you wanted to watch a show or even see a documentary on crowdfunding or whatever on finance, you didn't have the ability to be interactive, to ask questions and go back and forth. And even so, you also, you really couldn't even produce or even have a show, unless you had a studio and, you're part of the network. And, now look at this, as the whole media has become completely democratized. Now we have the opportunity to just, be here together, instantaneous, and go back and forth with questions. And just like how media is changing through that same technology is really transforming finance I think for companies to just have the ability to go out there and utilize their networks to go and raise capital, all over the world. It's powerful. It really is powerful. Some more questions are coming in. Let's see. Self-evaluations in equity are a problem with too many unrealistically high valuations. That, Joseph, I could not agree with you more. That is a problem. I think, one of the things that we really need to do in kind of making sure that doesn't become a problem is that we really do need to educate the crowd. The crowd really needs to understand what appropriate valuations are. I mean, it's kind of, if you think about it, similar to what happened back in the 90s with the .com explosion and all of these, small .com companies, it was, trading at these crazy, wacky valuations, and people were buying them because people really didn't even understand the metrics. I think that's a really important thing. I mean, we really do need to I think had the internet back at that time, we sort of started to have like these kind of chat rooms where people were going back and forth to discuss these things. But now, we really have so much more of an opportunity to really understand and really kind of just what we're doing now, and talking to the experts and really understanding why this company has an unrealistically high valuation, and and to really hear what the crowd is saying too. I mean, that not enough could be said for crowd intelligence either. And I think that that's really an important element too, in just kind of this new world of finance, modern finance through technology. We get this incredible opportunity now, to really understand and know what everybody is thinking, and how we could act on that. So you're right. I think that it's a problem, but I think it's one that's definitely manageable. So I think that that's a good thing too. I see there's a couple of minutes left, so I figured I would just end off maybe with just a couple of tips. I actually printed these out, but I don't know if it works because I'm filming myself, so it's probably showing the letters backwards. So I'm not going to do that. But okay, so I'll just go through the tips so you could hear them. But first, tip one, and this is I just thought would be great for tips for anyone out there raising capital. Tip one, test the waters. Crowdfunding gives you the I'll do that. I'll send these out after. So tip one is test the waters. You have the opportunity to test the waters through rewards-based crowdfunding, before you go out there to market with an unproven product. You have the opportunity to test the waters even through a Reg A Plus and some equity deals. That's really a smart thing to do. Tip two, we talked a little bit about that. Always be building your network. Just constantly, even when you're sitting out, watching TV, you could just have your laptop or your iPad out there and just, article searching and just writing those names down, and connecting on LinkedIn, connecting in groups. I mean, LinkedIn has been such a valuable resource for me over the years. Met so many great clients, companies, everything. Okay, here's another great tip. Tip three, treat your shareholders as you would treat your friends. And I brought that one in there only because, I think that we have this opportunity now where we could be, communications and technology brought us so much closer together that we really have the ability to constantly be communicating with our shareholders. And there was a great story of a company called Smarty Pants. They make these children's vitamins. I actually give them to my kids. And they did a equities crowdfunding on Circle Up, and it was a great success story. And I interviewed the CEO. And one of the things she told me, and this kind of always stuck with me, but she said, we are frequently sending out emails to our shareholders. And in those emails, where telling the good, the bad, and we always have an ask in there. And, the good, positive things that were happening with the company, things we're really excited about, bad, maybe something that didn't go our way, something that we need to work on. But it's always good to be always upfront and honest with your shareholders because they'll respect that and appreciate that. And then the ask, does anyone know anyone at Whole Foods that maybe could get us in? And they were, really successful in doing that. And they always were able to bring back their shareholders because they developed this real relationship with them to subsequent rounds. So that's tip three. But along those lines, while tip three is treat your shareholders as you would your friends, tip four for entrepreneurs is business associates are not always your friends. So one of the other tips that I think is really good for any entrepreneur out there is that, anytime you enter into any kind of a business transaction, if you just do this one thing, you will always you will always be successful. If you always enter the transaction if you always go into it, if you always enter a transaction honorably, but with the expectation that the other side is not going to be entering into it honorably, you'll be fine. You'll do just fine. And then tip number five, is never, ever, 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 ever give up. And that's kind of an easy one, but there's a great story. If I could just have 2 minutes to just tell this really great story, it's because it's one of my favorite stories about entrepreneurs. And not many people know this story, but it's the story of the car radio. And the way the car radio was actually first invented was there were these two guys, I think in 19 I think it was around 1929, took their girlfriends on a date to this like lookout point on this double date, and they were sitting there looking at this beautiful scenery, and one of the women said, wouldn't it be great if we had music to listen to, if there was like a radio in the car? And the guy said, oh, that would be a great idea. And they had tinkered with some radios in World War I, and they set out to go and invent the first car radio. And they started to do that, and it took a while, but they eventually were able to get it right. And then they needed money to go out there and market the product and really build a business. So what would they do at that time? I mean, it wasn't like you could go to Kickstarter, obviously. What they did was they went to their local banker. And they figured, you know what, let's install the radio in the local banker's car, because once he sees that he has this radio in his car, there's no way he won't give us money. And they did that. Unfortunately, the radio made the car catch on fire, the banker's car. So he was not too eager to write a check and did not. And now these guys were really kind of down to, their last penny. And there was a big radio convention that was going on, probably like the Crowd Invest Summit of the radio convention back in, the 1920s at that time. And they didn't even have enough money for a ticket to get into the convention. But what they did was they drove 800 miles to get to the convention, and they sat outside the convention and just turned the car radio on. And then as people were walking in and out, they actually kind of crowdfunded in a way. They were getting pre-orders and networking, and they ended up, meeting some financiers and were able to get the business off the ground from that. And they needed a name for their company. So at that time, everything had like an Ola at the end of it. There was the old Victrola or the Radiola. I mean, so they named their company Motorola. And that was actually the story of Motorola. And I love that story because there's a little bit of crowdfunding in it. There's, it just kind of talks about, the democratization, a little bit of capital. I think it's a great story all around. So that's the story of Motorola. And then I think, last tip, final, is I would just say, fail. Go fail your asses off, because failing is such a good thing. As Henry Ford said, I think it was Thomas Edison said, I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 different ways of doing it better. I can't even say, I just love failing, because every time I fail, it just, the next time around, it just, you just bounce up, and you bounce back stronger and smarter. And, each time I just look, failure is just some of the best lessons in life, and some of the greatest accomplishments, I think, just came from, at least for me personally, from my most crushing failures. But I know that's for a lot of people. So tip number 6, fail your ass off. And I think my time is out. Any other questions or anything out there? Because I really can just ramble on for days. I don't want to do that to you all, but so with that, I'm just going to say, no, it was great having lunch with you guys, and love this whole series. And feel free to reach out anytime, DaraAlbrightMedia.com, and connect on LinkedIn. And hope to talk to you all soon. Thanks.